Here we go with the first of 8 retirement mistakes you can
One of
avoid.
one of our podcast reviewers recently said, "There's some good content in there if you skip past the first 2 minutes of the show." I think they gave us like a 2-star review.
Oh gosh, no, that was the best part of the show.
I agree with you, Emilia. I agree.
All right. So the first of the 8 that we're going to be discussing today is not having a cash flow plan. So Jason, how is that mistake number 1?
Mistake number 1. So, Emilia, you probably don't do this, but anytime I start feeling ill or sick or I hurt myself, one of the first things I do is I go on WebMD and I type in the symptom. And like you said, as we were getting ready to start the show, as soon as I do that, I'm convinced that I'm dying. I've got like 24 hours to live. But I thought we could talk about some of these mistakes in terms of the symptoms. So how you can identify if this is you. And the symptom to not having a good cash flow plan is that you're still thinking about your money in terms of rate of return. So you look at your 401k, your TSP, your IRA, your Roth, and what you're looking at with those accounts is the accumulation, how much it's growing on a year-over-year basis. That is a symptom of somebody who's totally focused in the accumulation phase of their life, and they have not mentally made this switch over to thinking about how is this money going to supply the income that I need for the rest of my life. So they're still in accumulation mode. When you go into retirement, you go into cash flow mode because now what you have is what you have. You're not trying to accumulate more. You're just trying to make sure that you don't run out of money in retirement. So the symptom, again, is if you find yourself focusing on rate of return, then you probably have the symptom of being stuck in accumulation mode. And maybe you're still a long ways out where you don't need to be thinking about retirement cash flow. But anybody that's getting ready to retire needs to be thinking about shifting their mindset to asking, how do we get this to produce income for us? Which accounts am I going to dip into first?
Oh, start taking the money this time.
Yeah.
All right. So on to our number 2 is not having a budget. This is a huge thing for a lot of our clients, and this is why you created or developed the retirement budget calculator.
You know that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink? This is like, here's my experience. This happens to me all the time. People they'll contact us and they'll say, hey, Jason, could you help us put together a plan? Sure. We'll put together a really good plan for them. And I'll ask them, what's your spending? What's your budget? And they say, well, we don't really keep real good tabs on it, but we think we spend about $5,000 or $6,000 a month. And then we build a whole plan around that number, and then they retire. And 3 months into retirement, they're calling me in a panic. They're like, we spend way more than we thought we did. We don't know where all the money's going. And it's because they didn't do the work ahead of time. I keep telling people, we built this really cool calculator to make it easier for people, because it can be, as people will discover this as they start doing the budgeting, it can be kind of complex. It's hard work. But if you want the confidence, then you need to do the work. There's 3 different types of millionaires out there, Emilia. There's millionaires that are millionaires because they make just a ton of money and it's easy to save and invest a ton of money and they're millionaires. There's millionaires out there because they don't make very much, but they save like crazy and they're very disciplined and they don't spend anything and they've saved their way to millions of dollars. And then the third type of millionaire are people that have inherited the money. They didn't really work for it, but all of a sudden they came into it because somebody else either made a lot or saved a lot. And the people that have the most confidence going into retirement aren't the people that made their way into retirement because they made so much. It's the people that were just the average Joe, that were good savers, and they're really disciplined about their spending. Those are the people that I found have the most confidence. Not having a budget, or maybe even a better example, for example, some of these people I talked to recently, they had bought the retirement budget calculator, but they never used it. They never put any information into it. So they didn't know really what their spending was. And you've just got to know that number. It's kind of like going out and buying a treadmill at the first part of the year and letting it sit in your house and then wondering why the weight's not coming off.
Yeah.
You buy the gym membership and you pay hundreds of dollars a year for the membership, but you never use it and you can't understand why your belts don't fit anymore.
Got to put in the work.
You got to do the work, and having a budget's important. The symptom is you say, I think we spend about this much. I think we'll be okay. But you really don't know how much you're spending, and that is very problematic. Benjamin Franklin once said, a small leak will sink a great ship. There's nothing that hurts more than when you see somebody in their retirement plan is going to fail as a result of their spending. And then what they try to do is take on more risk to get their money to outperform so that they can spend more. And man, you're playing with fire. If you don't spend the time to understand your spending, you could blow up your retirement.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to remind our listeners that you still have the opportunity to take advantage of the discounted price of the retirement budget calculator. And this is only until December 31st. So if you go to retirementbudgetcalculator.com and make the purchase today, you can use the coupon code podcast and still get, is it a 50%?
Still, yeah.
But then after December 31st, the price will be going up and changing to a subscription.
That's right. So all coupon codes go away December 31st, and it's no longer going to be a one-time fee. So people get grandfathered in right now. And in some ways, we announced this a couple weeks ago, and now we've just had a ton of people signing up. Oh. And I actually was not hoping that a ton of people would sign up for it.
Backfired.
Oh,
gosh. Okay. Well, is that all we had for budgets?
Yes.
Okay. So then we're moving on to number 3, which is not maximizing Social Security.
Here's the symptom. You haven't requested your most recent Social Security statement to check it for accuracy and to really understand how much income it's going to produce for you. Social Security represents about 40% of the average American's income in retirement. It's a very important source of income. It's tax efficient. It's inflation adjusted. There are spousal benefits. There are survivor benefits. There are delayed retirement credits. It's probably the second to buying a house. It's probably the most important financial decision that most people will ever make in their life, is when to start Social Security and how to turn it on, and understanding how it's going to work when something happens to one spouse in a relationship. And so it takes a little, again, how's that old saying go? An ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. Have you ever heard that one? An ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. Or the way that one of my mentors said it was, he said, how did he say this? He says, it'll come to me in a second. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay. All right. So,
but maximizing Social Security, very important. Get your statement, request a statement, set up Social Security, understand what the benefit is, and understand how that's going to play into your cash flow plan. Because again, retirement's all about cash flow.
Yes, very important. And so moving on to number 4, and this one's having debt. Yeah, that's a big symptom. Yes.
Yep. In a perfect world, when you head into retirement, you have no debt. No credit cards, no car payments, and the house is paid off. Because debt is slavery. Debt means that you don't have freedom. Debt means you owe somebody. And even if it's just the mental freedom that comes along with knowing that you are completely out of debt can be very freeing for many people. But it opens up options. It gives you more flexibilities. Now, there's a lot of people that we meet with, Emilia, where it makes sense for them to not pay off all of their mortgage heading into retirement because it could, devastate their retirement funds. So we certainly don't want people to incur a great big tax liability by cashing out their IRA or their TSP just because they don't want to have a mortgage in retirement. But if you've been good about paying that thing down, paying it off, and it means you have to work one extra year to enter retirement with no mortgage, well, that's a great place to be if you can enter retirement with no debt.
Yeah. All right, Jason. So now moving on to number 5, which is assuming unrealistic stock market rates of return.
Yeah, easy one here. Just for people to think, what rate of return do you expect to see your money growing at in retirement? And what if they say the answer is 7 to 10% per year, then they're still thinking in accumulation terms, because everything's expensive right now. Stocks are expensive, bonds are expensive. You listen to guys like Warren Buffett who say that, maybe a 5% return is what should be expected going forward from this point forward, or it's just in a world where everything's expensive, can you assume that these high returns are going to continue for the next 10 years? And I think if you're using the number 7 to 10% and you're expecting your 401k, your IRA, your TSP has to earn that much in order to make the numbers work, then you could be setting yourself up for failure because you have no control over it. So what we like to tell people is if you can assume a 3%, maybe a 4% return on your money and see how the numbers work under that scenario, that's going to be a lot safer than assuming 7 to 10.